Well, hi South Coast Christian Life Groups. Welcome back to your group. We are just past the halfway point of our winter trimester. As always, it's our hope that these groups have been life-giving, encouraging, and challenging as you continue to grow in your faith and as you're engaging with this current sermon series. Before we get started, just a quick reminder as usual, we encourage openness and sharing, but please be conscious of the feelings of others in the group or outside of the group. And we also ask that everything that's shared in the group stays in the group. Again, this helps build trust and community. If you want to catch up on the current sermon series or even past sermons, you can find those on YouTube or on our podcast. And then all of that's also available on southcoastchristian.com on the website. So feel free to check that out. So let's jump into today's discussion. We're halfway through the series, Jesus Said, where we're covering the parables that Jesus taught. And really, we're looking for a deeper meaning within these messages in these parables. Last Sunday, we studied the parable of the builder, or builders, depending on how you look at it, which is found in Matthew chapter 7. And just like last week, now would be a great time if you wanted to pause the video and read this parable as a group. The parable actually follows two builders, one who builds his house on the sand, and the other who builds his house on a solid rock foundation. At first glance, the parable is kind of straightforward, but what I'm wondering is how we can apply this to our spiritual lives, especially in our modern society. So in the message last weekend, Pastor Tom shared three main points, which will be the focus of our discussion today. So the first point from the message this weekend is that everyone is a builder. And I'm not talking about physically being a builder, although some of us are. Really what we're saying is we all have the responsibility and sometimes the burden of building our lives. We build relationships, marriages, families, careers. We raise children. All those things are good. But what Jesus is teaching us is that the foundation of all of those things must be our obedience to God. So Pastor Tom explains it this way. Go ahead and take a look.
From Jesus' parable, there's only two options. There's a wise builder, and then there's a foolish builder. All of us in this room are in one category or the other. Just FYI. If you're following the Bible, if you believe the Bible, and maybe you're a guest with us, and this whole thing is new, so I'll try to take it down a notch. The contrast between the two houses is that one house was built upon the sand, and the other house was built upon the rock. And the house that was built on the sand, the problem with that is that it will falter over time. It will shift, it will change, and all of a sudden things become crooked and things that start to take place because the sand is soft. And the soft sand will make it difficult for the structure to remain true.
So we learned this weekend that building on the bedrock is wise, while building on the sand is foolish, hence where Pastor Tom references the wise and the foolish builders. But let's take a step backwards from there and address the deeper question of why building on sand is so attractive to us in the first place. Is it because it's easier? Is it because our lives are more flashy and impressive to others? We'll discuss that in the first question, which is why is it easier to build on sand than on rock? And I'm not talking about actual construction, but I'm talking about in our lives. Go ahead, pause the video right there, and I'll be right back with you. I hope you had some great discussion there. We actually discussed that question as a staff this week, and we had some really interesting thoughts that were shared. We equated building a strong foundation for our lives to putting in the hard, detailed work that often goes unnoticed or unrecognized. When was the last time you saw a beautiful brand new home and you asked to speak to the builder simply to compliment him or her on the foundation, right? It's usually, wow, those bay windows or the 3-car garage, or man, what you did with that patio is just phenomenal. So sometimes we focus kind of on the details and the features of our house, our spiritual house, and simply because we want to be recognized and seen by others. So one final thought that came out of our staff discussion when Pastor Brett shared that if you yourself built your own house, you might actually be proud of the foundation. You'd remember the designing and the planning and the excavating, the leveling. You might even have some calluses on your hands from pouring the concrete, and you rest easy at night knowing that your house isn't going to fall over. So what Jesus is asking from us is to be a part of the building of our lives and to take part in that, but building it from the foundation up. And that requires reliance and obedience to God. The second point from the message this weekend is that everyone faces storms. As we saw last week in Texas, the storms that they experienced literally revealed the quality and construction of their actual homes. Our spiritual lives are the same. It's only when the storms come that we have an opportunity to test our spiritual foundational strength. That's why in the Bible, in James, he says, "Consider it pure joy when troubles come your way." So the next question for today is, how can I find joy when a storm comes? Maybe share some examples of storms that you've faced in your life that revealed where you were at in terms of your spiritual foundation. Go ahead, pause the video right there. I'll be back with you in a minute. I hope you had some great discussion. So the final point from the message this Sunday was, only those who obey survive. And that sounds kind of harsh at first glance or first listen, but in reality, it's meant to encourage us to be wise as we build and not foolish, really for our own good. An illustration that we kind of came up with as a staff is that we all know teenagers. Some of us have them living in our homes. Some of us, at the very least, were a teenager once, or we know them, or we serve with the Echo Youth Ministry here at the church. Now imagine how much better a teenager's life might be if they simply obeyed, if they were obedient. How much hardship would they be spared without making some of those decisions or bad decisions they might make? And more importantly, how many blessings and more blessings might they enjoy if they were just obedient? Well, that applies to us. How many more blessings would we experience, and how much better would our lives be if we were simply obedient to God and we built our homes wisely? Not only to endure the storms, but also to enjoy the blessings that God has for us. Here's how it was explained on Sunday. Go ahead and check out this clip.
Jesus knew that many, and I thought about this, it was kind of, let's go back into the environment where we were at with Jesus. He's sitting on the side of the mountain. He's sharing from his heart. But he knows, because Jesus is all-knowing, he knows as he's sharing that there's going to be many people that leave that side of the mountain. And man, they're going to think, this was so great. Did you hear all the things? Did you hear about the miracles he was doing? Did you hear about... And they're going to hear the words, but they're never going to choose to obey the words. And the difference in success for your life is for those who choose to obey the Word of God.
So the last question for today is it possible to go back and rebuild a foundation after your house has been damaged in a storm? Again, I'm talking from a spiritual standpoint. Go ahead, chew on that for a few minutes. I'll be back with you. Well, I hope that your group had some great discussion today and really unpacked what it means to build a life on a strong foundation. So if you have some extra time and you'd like to keep the discussion going, here are a few additional questions on the screen for your group to take a look at, or for you to reference on your own later on this week. If you missed this sermon, as I said earlier, you can catch up on YouTube or the podcast, and both are always available at southcoastchristian.com. Our staff and our group leaders love you, and we're praying for you. But let's be a church that's filled with people who build our lives on a foundation of obedience and truth, so that we can be blessed and that we can be a blessing to others. Have a great week. See you next week. God bless.